Hello, Big Italy 42 here again with Chris Ruckus, Space Jam 23 DFS, and we are here talking about some DraftKings and FanDuel cash game strategies for today, April 7th, 2015. Technically the third day of the MLB season, but second actual day with more than one game. So an 8-game slate on tap tonight. There's quite a few solid pitchers. Obviously not the aces that there were yesterday. That's kind of how things go in the second big day of the season. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to help you guys build some lineups. We've got some that we've got prepared. We're going to run you guys through the process, who we're looking at, some other guys who consider the same positions, and then we're going to go from there. So you ready to get things going here?
Yeah, let's start.
All right, we're going to start off with FanDuel, where at starting pitcher, you've really got two top options for your cash games. And you'll obviously want to have a Vegas favorite because the win is so heavily weighted, not only on FanDuel, but on every daily fantasy site where you play MLB. So that leaves you with your two top options being, of course, Zach Greinke at $10,000 and Jake Arrieta at $8,800. So to give you guys a little bit of taste of both worlds here, Chris has a cash game lineup prepared with Zach Greinke. I have one with Jake Arrieta, and we're going to run through both of them. So why don't you go ahead and kick things off here with your Zach Greinke?
Yeah, perfect. So Zach Greinke locked in at pitcher mainly because he is the biggest favorite today, minus 163 as of 11:10 a.m. Eastern time. He is at 163 lowest total, so locked and loaded. Now, with that being said, he's also the most expensive pitcher on the day. We've got to find some type of value. How do we find value? A good split, batting high in the order, obviously at low prices. When I saw some prices, here's what we're looking at for our value picks to fit Greinke today. Eric Young, Angel Pagan, Desmond Jennings. So our three outfielders all are under 3K. Yesterday, Pagan batted, I believe, leadoff, or third. Pagan batted third yesterday. Desmond Jennings batted sixth with Jaso leading off. Jaso might get rested today, which might bump Jennings up into that leadoff spot or a little bit higher in the order. But he also has an elite matchup versus a not wonderful pitcher. Chen is okay, but Jennings is in a really good spot today. And then Eric Young batting leadoff for 2,600. So right there, we have three players all batting hopefully in the top part of the order. The only asterisk is Desmond Jennings. And to note, he was my last player pick.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So Desmond Jennings was more of a fill-in to discuss above. Now, we talk about opportunity cost. Shortstop today. Obviously, Troy Tulowitzki. Our next highest price shortstop is Starlin Castro and then Jimmy Rollins. So, as you can see, the drop-off from Troy Tulowitzki to these other guys is just immense. That I put Troy Tulowitzki second in my lineup after Greinke. Going back up, third base is Nolan Arenado for me. So you'll notice something. I took two Rockies back-to-back together. I like to target poor pitching in high total games. Matt Garza in a 8-point spread or 8-run total spread makes me feel good. So I like Arenado at third. We will discuss a couple other third base options because it was one of the best, I shouldn't say best, but deeper positions you're able to play. From the other side, going to second base, Colby Lewis last year was a targeted pitcher. Second base isn't wonderful tonight. You can either pay up for Robinson Cano, low total, no thanks. D. Gordon, who isn't bad at 3,700, but 3,100 we have Ben Zobrist. Had a great game yesterday, playing against Colby Lewis at home. Love Zobrist today. Probably one of my favorite options on the day. First base, our other value pick to fit, our Troy Tulowitzki, who's going to give us a comparative advantage at the position. Adam Lind batted, I believe, fifth yesterday. And, 2,800, high-powered offense with Lucroy, Carlos Gomez, that offense can spark. He had 3 hits yesterday, 4 at-bats, had a good game. 2,800, you can't beat it, especially when first base is not deep. It doesn't have some, great, your Miguel Cabreras today. We've got Paul Goldschmidt, who's almost as much as Troy Tulowitzki. He's more than Troy Tulowitzki. And then Anthony Rizzo, who is 4,400 in a low total game against Lance Lynn. So it made sense to punt first base. And then catcher for me, Buster Posey was the number one catcher with Lucroy right behind him. Love Lucroy's price at 3,800. Don't get me wrong. Love Posey at 4,300. But personally, I typically punt catchers in cash games, and Zunino had the biggest pop and home run potential at that price for 2,800. So he was how I finished off the lineup. So top to bottom, Zach Greinke, Mike Zunino, Adam Lind, Ben Zobrist, Nolan Arenado, Troy Tulowitzki, Angel Pagan, Eric Young, and Desmond Jennings. You have $100 remaining. If you didn't mind Desmond Jennings, you could, take a look at, run through there and say, listen, I've got 2,900. Who can I pick? Maybe you believe in, someone getting hot. Alejandro De Aza, home run yesterday, 2,900. Feel free to plug him in.
Yeah. All right. And on the other side of things, I'm going a little bit different here to give you some diversity. And I went with Jake Arrieta at $8,800. Get yourself a $1,200 discount from Greinke, but what you are sacrificing is the favorite. And Greinke, obviously the biggest favorite on the board. And Arrieta, pretty much in a pick'em here against St. Louis. He's a minus 110 favorite, so a slight favorite over Lance Lynn. But you did see the St. Louis struggle with righties last year. They were right around the league average. And Jake Arrieta was the quiet ace last year. I mean, he 9.59 strikeouts per 9 innings. His strikeout rate at 27%, which was phenomenal, and his walk rate is less than 1% there. So he was just phenomenal. I mean, didn't walk batters, didn't give up any unnecessary base runners, and he's got elite upside as far as strikeouts go. I mean, right up around Greinke. So I'm going to take a little bit of the discount there, go with that, him in my cash game. Next up is Buster Posey at catcher. I am paying up for him. I see him as the top option at catcher, and I don't think it's particularly close. Second option would be Jonathan Lucroy, who's $500 cheaper. But you do get Posey against Robbie De La Rosa in Arizona, and the highest total of the day at 8.5 runs. So I do want myself some exposure to that. Posey batting cleanup, as he should be once again today. So I really like that spot for him. Don't mind paying up. First base, going with the same thing as Chris here. It's really hard not to on FanDuel with Adam Lind against Jordan Lyles there at $2,800. Once again, high total, 8-run total there. And a hitter's park, should be batting fifth, maybe even a little bit higher if Ryan Braun ends up sitting today, which he might. So got to go with that. Second base, once again, chalk play going to be Ben Zobrist. Obviously mentioned he homered yesterday in a good spot. Now against Colby Lewis, who, as we know, one of the easiest pitchers in the game to pick on. So you got to like that for Ben Zobrist. He's got some upside and should have a pretty safe floor there as well, now that he's batting the 3-hole for Oakland. So third base, going a little bit cheaper here, as I needed to do in order to get Buster Posey. Manny Machado against Tampa Bay. Taking on a rookie pitcher, only making his 6th start in Carnes. And, Machado is pretty solid against right-handers and left-handers throughout his short career. And he's got significant upside with some pop in his bat. So I do like Manny Machado there if I'm paying down. Not really anybody I like below him there, unless you want to go with like a Brett Lowry type. But he batted 6th yesterday. So I'd rather go with a guy a little bit higher in the order in my cash games. Get yourself that extra at bat. Shortstop, I'm with Chris here. Got to be Troy Tulowitzki. I mean, especially on FanDuel where he's just crazy cheap. $4,400. Doesn't seem like it's cheap, but like we already mentioned before, I mean, take advantage of this price while you can. He had a great game yesterday, and once again, a good matchup against a righty in Matt Garza, who has struggled over the past year or so with his velocity. So definitely like Troy Tulowitzki. You're going to be hard-pressed catching up to somebody if Tulowitzki has a big game and cash game and you don't have him at shortstop. So really not a lot of other good options there anyway. Outfield, I'm going Angel Pagan, $2,900. Got a solid spot in the Giants lineup. Once again against Robbie De La Rosa. I want to get myself more exposure to that game. Desmond Jennings at $2,800, like Chris mentioned. Did bat 6 yesterday, which we don't really like, but should be up higher in the order, assuming that J-So sits, and it looks like he might. And then my last outfielder here at $2,700 is going to be Travis Snyder. Had himself a nice game yesterday. Went 3 for 4 with a double and 2 RBIs. Hit batted 5th. Really cheap, and he looks like he's fitting in well in that Baltimore lineup. And he's one of those guys that was talked about as a sleeper for season long and DFS. So I'm really taking advantage of that price tag, and I like the spot there for him. So with that being said, you can go a number of routes here. If you wanted to go cheaper at pitcher than these two guys, you obviously want to get a guy that's a favorite and a solid situation. So a guy that I like, and I know Chris likes, if you really wanted to go cheap, be a little bit different, would be Jesse Hahn. He's $7,600. He's got a much better price tag on DraftKings, which we'll get to there. So if for some reason you paid down, is Jesse Hahn your guy?
Jesse Hahn is my guy without a doubt. I mean, just looking at Vegas odds, who we need to trust and learn to believe in, is open up at minus 160. The consensus right now is minus 153, actually giving him the second highest money line of the day behind Greinke. So yeah, love Hahn if I'm paying down.
Yeah, completely agree there. And we'll run down the other positions here for other options. Catcher, I mentioned Jonathan Lucroy. He's in a good spot against Jordan Lyles. If you didn't want to pay up for Posey, you weren't comfortable maybe paying down for Zunino, I think he's the middle ground there, guy. You agree?
You agree.
All right, first base pretty much has to be a lock, I think, in your cash games. Obviously, plenty of other options for tournaments, but cash games, you can get Adam Lind batting in the heart of that order against a weak pitcher at 2,800. I mean, there's no other way to go there.
Yeah, I mean, if you do need to spend $3,500, spend it on Mike Morse. That would be my only suggestion at first base.
Yeah, I agree with that there. Second base seems pretty cut and dry for me here. Ben Zobrist's playing well. Great lineup spot, great situation, great price, $3,100. Seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, don't play anybody else at second base in your cash games.
All right, moving on to third base. You've actually got a lot of options here. I know Chris likes Nolan Arenado. I like him as well. But obviously, since I paid up a catcher, it was hard to slot him in as well. But you can look at guys like Evan Longoria, who's in a good spot. He's facing Wei-Yin Chen today. So you're not in love with the lefty matchup there. But at the same time, $3,800 he makes for a fine play. Not playing Kyle Seager against a lefty. He's much more of a better hitter against righties. And you can look at Aramis Ramirez, was a popular play yesterday. Kind of struggled. I mean, he had a couple hits, but at $3,400, I don't mind him if you wanted to go different from Machado and Arenado.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm on both of those. Don't really have anyone else. No real punts at that position.
Yeah. Shortstop, pretty cut and dry for me. You need to avoid Troy Tulowitzki at this price. I know he's not playing at home, but the guy's one of the best hitters in the game. By far the best shortstop in the game. And at $4,400, we've already mentioned it a couple times. I'll continue to say it. His price will not be this cheap for very long. So just play Troy Tulowitzki in your cash games.
Yeah, agree.
Elsewhere in the outfield, there are a ton of options. If you want to pay for him, you've got Mike Trout is the obvious top option at $5,100 against James Paxton. It's going to be really tough to pay for him in your cash games if you want to have an elite pitcher. But maybe you pay down to a Jesse Hahn. You pay down to one other position. You may be able to get him in, but don't think it's necessary today. Some other great options. You've got Nelson Cruz against a lefty. We talked about him in the FanDuel podcast. Mashes lefties. If you can afford Nelson Cruz, he's my favorite pricey dollar for dollar guy in the outfield. How about you?
Yeah, I love Nelson Cruz. Yeah, I mean, dollar for dollar, he's got a great price, $4,200. Cheaper than Carlos Gomez, Adam Jones, Stanton, and Trout. He probably has one of the best matchups, too. So he just crushes. So like Nelson Cruz a lot if you are paying up. I will say this. I think Angel Pagan represents one of the most elite values today, right behind Ben Zobrist.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, under $3K for him, batting that great spot and swinging a nice bat and in a great spot against Robbie De La Rosa, so you got to like that. Desmond Jennings, we already mentioned, we hope he hits higher in the order, but I still don't think he's a bad play even if he slot around 5th or 6th at $2,800. Some other options you've got in the outfield, all the Colorado bats are really in play. You've got Carlos Gonzalez, $3,900. Corey Dickerson, one of the best hitters in the game against righties, and I don't see that trend stopping anytime soon. He's at $3,900. I think if you're going to pay a little bit more for one of these guys, I think Corey Dickerson would be the guy I'm going to go with there in that range.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I would go with Corey Dickerson in that spot.
All right, elsewhere in the outfields, I think we pretty much nailed all of the cheap plays. There's no one else that I feel really comfortable with in a cash game outside of the guys that we've already mentioned, except for maybe Ender Inciarte at $2,900. Once again, highest total on the board, and he'll get a matchup against Ryan Vogelsong. And finished strong last year, had a nice spring, so I think he's a fine option if you wanted to swerve off of one of these guys as well. All right, that's going to wrap it up here for FanDuel. We're going to go ahead and move it over to DraftKings, where you've got two pitchers, obviously. That's the big main difference here. So it's going to be really hard to fit your two studs. Obviously, your ideal scenario would be that you could fit in Greinke and Arrieta for the upside, but you don't necessarily need that upside in cash games. You want to go with the safe floor. So Chris has a lineup here that he's going to go with one combination of two pitchers. I'm going to go with a different one, and we're going to kind of compare like we did with the FanDuel one. So go ahead and kick things off there for you, Chris.
Alrighty, so once again, I'm on Greinke. Enough said. Lowest total, highest money line. Lock him in. Love him. Number one pitcher of the day. And we talked about Jesse Hahn earlier, and we said we'd get to him on DK. He's 6K on DK. Second highest favorite of the day against a Texas team that struggles. I like Hahn a lot. I feel like he's with pitching today, there's some weather concerns. I don't mind taking a little bit of a risk at pitching, which he is, and I typically would not recommend that. But given today's circumstances, we've got a lot of our top pitchers in, weather concerns. I like Hahn in this spot. Going on what we talked about on FanDuel, Ben Zobrist at second base still has an elite price, $3,900, and then Troy Tulowitzki. I mean, he's $5,100. He's cheaper than a lot of players on here. I mean, we've got Carlos Gomez more than him, Paul Goldschmidt more than him, Corey Dickerson is the same price. I mean, Troy Tulowitzki with no other shortstops is just locked in for me. Our second best shortstop price wise is Gene Segura, D. Gordon, Brandon Crawford. Plug Troy Tulowitzki in. With that being said, Mike Trout's price as well on DK is per 5K. So all those players I just named that cost more than Troy Tulowitzki also cost more than Mike Trout. I think he's in a great spot against a young pitcher who's shown control issues. So plugging, Mike Trout, Troy Tulowitzki, Ben Zobrist, Hahn, and Greinke in gives us a solid baseline. Looking at first base, Adam Lind was our go-to on FanDuel because of his price. Similar scenario, but a different price. Michael Morse for me, smashes his pitching on this split. Love Morse today. I think his price $3,900. He's got a tough matchup, but there's not a lot of options at first base. You could pay up for Rizzo if you'd like. Weather concerns. Freddie Freeman's got nobody around him. Brandon Belt, $4,700. Goldschmidt, $5,200. Just too pricey for me at a deeper position when I want Tulo. So Michael Morse made sense. Third base, I'm an Arenado fan. Plugged him in. Love this price of $4,300. I mean, I don't mind the direct pivot to Longoria right there. So my reason for Arenado was because I have Troy Tulowitzki and then Charlie Blackmon. So as you know, it creates a little bit of a synergy amongst your players where if one gets on base, the other one can hit him in, get some RBI, some runs. It just increases your floor when you can target these mini stacks. And then my final outfielder, my top outfield value of the day is Nelson Cruz.
Yeah, absolutely love Nelson Cruz, man.
Great spot. Great spot. And then final, my catcher is you leaves you with 4,600. Makes sense to plug in Buster Posey, number one catcher of the day for myself and Justin. But if you're a Lucroy fan, just believe in him. Plug in Lucroy in that position. Top to bottom, Zach Greinke, Jesse Hahn, Buster Posey, Michael Morse, Ben Zobrist, Nolan Arenado, Troy Tulowitzki, Charlie Blackmon, Nelson Cruz, Mike Trout.
Yeah, and I absolutely like that a lot. And for mine, you're obviously going to go with Zach Greinke, and I don't think you mentioned it here, but a significant price decrease from FanDuel. I mean, you're looking on FanDuel, you've got him at $10,000, and compared to Jake Arrieta, $8,800. And then you look over here on DraftKings, and he's at $8,800 with Arrieta being at $9,000. So really, really interesting, like a big swing there. I mean, the fact that Greinke's not even the most expensive pitcher on DraftKings just makes him even more appealing here in this spot. So for me, it's easy. Like you said, lock in Greinke, $8,800, no-brainer there. My strategy in this one to be a little bit different. I do think Hahn is the play, like Chris had mentioned. I mean, he's really cheap. He's a big favorite. The win is really highly weighted. But if you want a guy with a nice safe floor as well as some upside, slot in Tyson Ross along with Zach Greinke because you've got the lowest total on the day. Obviously, Greinke the favorite. They're obviously not both going to get the win, but you slot in both those guys. One of the two has very good odds to get the win. And, both guys high strikeout pitchers. And Tyson Ross now, finally, he's getting it going. He was solid last year. A big upside guy. And we saw some battles, actually, between these two guys last year where, each guy goes 7-8 innings, has a solid game. We see it like a 2-1 game, something like that. And if that happens, I mean, they could easily end up being the two top pitchers on the day. So the great thing about that is, you get the upside with both sides, and chances are you're going to get the win. So Buster Posey is my catcher there at $4,600. I do think he's a top option at catcher. Like I said before, I don't think it's particularly close. You could go to Lucroy, but he's only $200 cheaper. Get Posey against a weak Robbie De La Rosa. Lucroy, obviously, against Jordan Lyles. Both solid matchups, both high totals. I'm going to take the MVP and Buster Posey there. First base, I'm with Chris here. Michael Morse seems like the play at $3,900 against Atlanta and Alex Wood. So really not a lot of guys around that price. I mean, if you're looking for an alternative at first base, you've got Albert Pujols at $4,200. I'm not really willing to pay a little bit more for him. You've got Morse really has more pop in his bat with a nice, I believe it was a 252 ISO in this matchup against a righty. And I really just like him. There's really no one else that you'd like to pay down for at first base because obviously we mentioned Adam Lind, not a discounted price tag like he is on FanDuel. So Michael Morse is the way I'm going. Don't need to reiterate about Ben Zobrist. He's the play. If you don't want to play him at second base, you can slot him in the outfield, but there's not a lot of second base options that I like. Shortstop, Troy Tulowitzki, once again, not going to go too much on that. We already explained it a couple times for you. Jace Peterson, one of Chris's pets over here. He likes him a lot. I went ahead and slot him in at third base where there's top options, yes, but there's not a lot of cheap options. Manny Machado, who you can get at a discounted price on FanDuel, is sitting at $4,000 here, where Jace Peterson is at $31,000. Brett Lowry, I mentioned on FanDuel, not a bad option, but he's at $37,000. And really just not a lot of consistency, not many high floors here, low ends. Jace Peterson did bat second yesterday. Got the lefty-righty matchup against Matt Latos, who's decreased velocity. Don't really know what you're going to get out of him, but you don't expect him to blow anyone away. In the outfield, once again, going with Mike Trout at that price. The fact that he's not the most expensive hitter just is ludicrous to me. So I'm slotting him in against Paxton, who is a fine pitcher in his own right, but obviously Trout is going to get his against anyone. Nelson Cruz, elite value at $4,100 against the lefty. Last year, that was a great strategy. I did it a lot of times in tournaments and cash games alike. Play him and Adam Jones, his ex-teammate there. Both were lefty mashers, always batted back-to-back. Love Nelson Cruz against the lefty. It's pretty much a lock for me. And Ender Inciarte at $3,400. I mentioned him on FanDuel, was a little bit cheaper there. I like him a lot at $3,400 here. And we're going to go ahead and break down through each position and see some other guys we consider. We got a couple minutes left here. So elsewhere at starting pitcher, if you wanted to go with some different options, obviously we've already mentioned Greinke, we've mentioned Ross. Arrieta at $9K. Still not a bad price for him just because he's more expensive than Greinke. So if you wanted, you could go ahead and slot in both of those guys. And it's not too difficult to fit them in, actually. If you wanted, I could slot him in over Tyson Ross in my lineup now. You could take out Buster Posey, go ahead and slot in. You could have a Yadier Molina if you want to go that route. You could go Mike Zunino, who I think is a little pricey here, but still not a bad matchup. And then all of a sudden, you've got your two top options on the day slotted right in. But I do think that Hahn and Greinke is the way to go. I mean, you've got a cheap pitcher and expensive pitcher, both huge upside and huge favorites. So are there any other pitchers you'd consider in cash games?
No. I mean, right now I'm on Greinke and Hahn for the most part. I did just notice this, but I did not notice earlier. Nathan Karns, starting pitcher for Tampa Bay against Baltimore, is $5K.
Yeah.
I mean, that I can't justify putting him in cash games today. I don't believe. I don't know enough about himself. Young pitcher, something to look out for. When we see these pitchers at $5K, I mean, they have a decent game, go 5, 6 innings. They're paying off a serious price tag. Obviously, there's some risk associated with it, but I will be, following that closely.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's rare that you see a pitcher around that price that is actually a solid pitcher. I mean, Kyle Kendrick being the exception to the rule, obviously, after yesterday's performance, he was $4,200 and just absolutely went off, which no one expected. I still don't expect that next time. And if you went with Kyle Kendrick, good luck, congratulations on your good fortune. But don't expect that to last with Kyle Kendrick. But I do think that Carnes, he's not a bad pitcher. He actually does have some upside, but obviously more of a tournament option. And if you wanted to go in a tournament, you could always just slot in Hahn and Carnes for $11,000 and load up on any bat you could possibly want at any position.
Yeah.
Elsewhere, catcher, we kind of touched on all the options. Not a lot of guys that I really feel comfortable with tonight. You got Wilton Rosario in a fine spot, but he's a much better hitter against lefties, so that's a no thanks for me. Molina remains to be seen how well he's going to hit this season. He's a solid hitter all around, so I don't think he's a bad swerve if you wanted to pay down a little bit. But outside of that, no one I'm looking at. How about you?
Yeah, no one at catcher. One first base, as long as you have no other catchers, we'll smooth the first base. We talked about Michael Morse. We talked about Adam Lind earlier. Anthony Rizzo, he's a stud. He's got the home run potential. I don't mind him. One player we didn't talk about is C.J. Cron. Josh Hamilton's out. We could see Cron, if he gets in a better part of the order, be a decent value at 3,400. I mean, he's 500 less than Morse. It'd be one of those where if I can take Morse, I take him. If I love my lineup and with $3,400 left at first base, CJ Cron is not a bad player.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, he's a big upside. I saw a couple of multi-homer games from him last year, so he certainly has some upside. I think for me, if I'm going to pivot off of Morse, it probably would be to Albert Pujols, despite a lower total there, because we know batting a few spots behind Mike Trout, they got a loaded lineup there, and I mean Pujols, yes, getting up there in years, but still one of the better hitters, and especially on this slate, like we mentioned, rare that there's this few first base options, but I think he's one of the legitimate ones also.
Yeah, agree. I mean, and then moving to second base, I rarely will say this. I have one option for second base today, and it is Ben Zobrist. I mean, I honestly don't feel comfortable recommending a different second baseman for your cash game plays today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, you got Cano in the lefty-lefty matchup, no thanks. Scooter Gennett, not in a terrible spot, but there's not a chance I'm paying more for him than Ben Zobrist. I guess if you were just trying to be different, you could go that route, assuming he's batting higher in the lineup, maybe if Ryan Braun sits. But really, I'm with you here. Second base, the most barren position, really. I mean, maybe outside of shortstop, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a lock here. You go ahead and get Ben Zobrist and you move on.
Yep. Going to third base, we're going to be on all the same players we talked about earlier. Evan Longoria, Aramis Ramirez, Manny Machado, Nolan Arenado. Those are going to be your four players. I am a Jace Peterson, big fan of him. He has third base eligibility. I don't mind if you're going to, you're punting there with Jace Peterson. That's it. If you're paying up, Arenado, Longo, Aramis, that's pretty much it for me. I think it's a pretty clear line of who to play.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there. Just not a lot of guys. There's really no need to force guys in your lineup, especially in cash game. That's why we're stressing the safe plays. And in cash games, you want to have yourself a safe floor, and you want to provide some upside if possible. But really, what you want is the guys that aren't going to kill your lineup. The guys that aren't going to come out, strike out 4 times, and cover those all pretty well here so far. So, shortstop. Last time we're going to say it. Play Troy Tulowitzki. If you're doing anything else, you're just trying to be cute, and there's no need for that.
Next. Can I say next again? Next.
One more time. Next.
Play Troy Tulowitzki. Next.
And then in the outfield, Mike Trout, if you can afford him, obviously your top option as he is pretty much every day. And Nelson Cruz, a great price as well. Giving you a couple swerves off of these guys if you wanted a little bit different. Giancarlo Stanton's always in play. Alex Wood, a fine pitcher, but a guy who has struggled at times. Corey Dickerson, I think, would be my interesting swerve. I think I'd rather have him than Carlos Gomez, only because Dickerson is just so good against righties. And, batting the heart of that order, which it's only been one day, but they're on fire. We know what this team is capable of. And I mean, Dickerson with as much upside really as anyone on the board today. So I think it's probably not a smart idea to go with him over Trout, but in all reality, I mean, his matchup is just as good, if not better.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. So the one unique part we're seeing today from DraftKings is Mike Trout less than Corey Dickerson. Angel Pagan more than Nelson Cruz. It's like some really interesting prices, and I think that makes cash games a little bit easier, especially Mike Trout or Corey Dickerson. Over the course of one day, yeah, you might Dickerson might outscore him, but over the course of the year, which we're looking at with DFS, you want Mike Trout.
Yep. And most days it's really tough to get yourself the two biggest favorites on the board, as well as guys like Posey, Cruz, Trout, Tulo. But today is that day, so take advantage of that while you can, because this is a rare occurrence in DFS.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you summed it up. Outfield, you've got some options, but you're going to want to target those Brewers, Nelson Cruz, and Mike Trout.
Yep, completely agree. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for us here on FanDuel and DraftKings cash game strategy. So if you got any questions, find one of us on Twitter. I'm at BigItaly42. He's at SpaceJam23DFS. We will see you guys again next time.